Hey gang, and welcome back. Just a reminder, you can now use the promo code MTGMudsta, all caps, at flipsidegaming.com. You'll get 10% off orders over $10 and help with the channel at the same time. Happy Thursday everyone, and welcome back. This week, Sean is playing Malfegor and keeps a hand with Swamp, Two Mountains, Vanefire Border Post, Terminate, Crucible of Worlds, and Rakdos Keyruin. Matt is playing his 8.5 Tails, and he keeps a hand with 4 Plains, Mistfill Plains, Sword of Feast and Famine, and Wrath of God. Mike is playing his now defunct Sydri deck, and keeps a hand with Felwar Stone, Fabricate, Phyrexian Metamorph, Johnny Goldmane, Darksteel Citadel, Island, and Terramorphic Expanse. And lastly, Trevor is taking his Yidris deck out for a spin, and keeps a hand with Breeding Pool, Smoldering Marsh, Skyshroud Claim, Soul Ring, Darksteel Ingot, Rites of Flourishing, and Reliquary Tower. Trevor wins the die roll, and starts us off. Trevor plays a Breeding Pool, having it come into play untapped, taking 2, and casts a Soul Ring before passing. As Sean is called away, I have to sub in, and I play a Swamp and pass to Matt. Matt plays a Mistfill Plains, which comes into play tapped, and passes turn. Mike plays a Terramorphic Expanse before passing turn. Trevor plays a Reliquary Tower, and casts Ranger's Path to find 2 forest cards. He finds an Overgrown Tomb, and a Cinderglade before passing to Sean. Sean gets back after helping a customer, and he corrects my misplay, having wanted to play a border post instead of the land. Sean then plays the Swamp for his turn, and passes. Matt plays a Plains, and passes turn. At the end of his turn, Mike cracks Terramorphic to find a Plains, and starts his own turn. Mike plays an Island for his turn, and casts a Felwar Stone before passing to Trevor, who has 7 mana on turn 3. Trevor decides to cast a Skyshroud Claim during his main phase, having not ramped enough, and grabs a Forest and a Stomping Ground, paying 2 life to have it come into play untapped. Trevor then pays 3 to cast Darksteel Ingot, and plays a Watery Grave, paying 2 to have it come into play untapped as well. Trevor then plays Rites of Flourishing, and passes turn. Sean draws 2 for his turn, and plays 2 basic lands. He then casts a Rakdos Keyruin, and with nothing else, he passes turn. Matt gets to play 2 Plains for his turn, and he casts a Sword of Feast and Famine, and passes to Mike. Mike draws 2, and plays Command Tower for his turn before casting a Fabricate, while Sean gets up close and personal with Trevor's Rite of Flourishing. Mike grabs a Solemn Simulacrum, and he plays New Benalia, scrying 1, and putting the card on the bottom. Trevor plays a Temple of Malady, scrying 1, and keeping the card on top. Trevor then casts Yidris, probably one of the only times he's ever done so on camera, but Sean decides to terminate it at the end of Trevor's turn. Sean plays a Mountain and a Canyon Slough. He then casts Crucible of Worlds and passes turn. Matt draws 2 for his turn and plays 2 Plains before passing. Mike plays a Darksteel Citadel and pays 4 to cast the Solemn Simulacrum, who finds him a basic Swamp. Trevor casts a Fact or Fiction, choosing Mike as his opponent, and he picks the piles with Mind's Dilation in it after Mike separates them into 2 piles. Mike then casts a Nyx Fleece Ram and passes turn. Trevor spares no time in his first main phase to drop Mind's Dilation, and Sean wishes he had a Pyroblast in hand. Trevor then casts a Cultivate and plays 2 Scrylands before searching, explaining he'll scry once he's done searching so he can pass to Sean. Sean plays a Sire of Insanity in his main phase, and Mind's Dilation triggers, revealing Animate Dead off the top of Sean's library. No one has any creature spells in the graveyard, so the spell just gets exiled. Sean then cycles his Desert of the Fervent, and moving to his end step, everyone is forced to discard their hand. Matt draws 2 and casts Cage Sun, revealing Approach of the Second Sun off the top, and Trevor decides to just leave the spell in exile. With no remaining mana, Matt has no choice but to discard his remaining card. Mike gains 1 in his upkeep, and he plays a Hallowed Fountain tapped. He then casts a Test of Endurance, and the Dilation trigger reveals Propaganda. Trevor is happy to take this spell, and Mike casts Sydri before passing and discarding his hand. Trevor plays a Bajuka Bog as his land for turn, and targets Sean's graveyard. Trevor then casts a Stunt Devil, who comes into play as a copy of the Sire of Insanity, and passes turn. Sean cycles Polluted Mire in his first main phase, and plays it from his graveyard thanks to the Crucible. Sean then casts a Beacon of Unrest, targeting Mike's Phyrexian Metamorph, and Trevor's Dilation trigger reveals a Rakdos Carnarium off of Sean's library. Sean has the Metamorph come into play as a copy of the Cage Sun, naming black, and he shuffles his beacon back into his library. Sean then moves to combat, swinging the Sire at Mike for 7 to try and keep him away from the test win. Mike chumps with Sydri, and at the end of turn, Sean discards a Kozilek, who hits the bin and shuffles himself into Sean's library. Matt taps 1 land to cast 8.5 Tails and reveals a Sphere of the Safety off the top. Trevor is happy to take it, as it works in conjunction with his Propaganda, and Matt casts a Thalia Heretic Cathar. Matt then gears up the Tails with the sword, and discards a Glacial Chasm at the end of turn. Mike plays an Evolving Wilds, which comes into play tapped. He then casts a Feldar Sovereign, giving the table more reasons to swing at him. He reveals a Drogskull Reaver off the top with a Dilation trigger, which Trevor is happy to take as well. With nothing else, Mike passes turn. Trevor draws 2 cards for his turn, and moves straight to combat, swinging the Drogskull at its very owner. The results of the combat step are Mike losing 6 and Trevor gaining 6, and Trevor then gets to draw 2 cards, as it's not actually 6 but 2 instances of 3 life gain. He then plays an island, and casts a Villainous Wealth where X is 14, and targets Mike. Mike flips the top 14 cards from his library, revealing lots of removal, but some goodies like Soul Ring and Ghostly Prison. Trevor then casts the following spells: Soul Ring, Viscopa Guildmage, Baleful Strix, which draws a card upon entering, Ghostly Prison, Boon Reflection, and casts a Survival Cache, gaining 4 life and drawing a card because he has more life than Sean, and then drawing again from the Reaver because he gained life. Trevor then casts a Seal of Cleansing, and casts Return to Dust in his main phase to exile Sean's Metamorph and Mike's Test of Endurance. Trevor then finishes by casting a Mystical Tutor to find a spell, and he drops a Wooded Foothills before going to find Expropriate and putting it on top of his library. Sean plays an Archfiend of Ifnir, which triggers Trevor's Mind's Dilation. Sean reveals a Mountain, which is a bit of a swing and a miss. The Archfiend does come into play tapped, and Sean uses Go for the Throat to get rid of Mike's Drogskull Reaver that Trevor had stolen. With nothing else, he passes to Matt. Matt plays a Blind Obedience in his first main phase, revealing a Plains which Trevor dismisses. Matt then casts Mother of Ruins, paying for the Extort trigger to drain the table for 1 life and gain 3 life. He then moves to combat, swinging his 8.5 tails at Sean for 5. Matt gets to untap his lands, and Sean is forced to discard nothing since everyone has basically been hellbent for most of this game. Mike gains 1 on his upkeep, and casts a Dimir Signet in his main phase. He then plays a Sydri, and Trevor misses both of the Mind's Dilation triggers. Trevor casts Expropriate in his first main phase, and everyone votes for Time. There's a bit of a mistake with the card though, but in the chaos of it, Trevor thought he only gained 3 extra turns as opposed to the 4. Trevor then cracks his Wooded Foothills to go and find Steam Vents. Trevor then casts a Steam Augury, and he separates the 5 into 2 piles. Matt gives him the pile with Windfall, as it won't really do much for him, and moves to combat. Trevor swings the Baleful Strix at Mike's for 1, and Chaos Warps the Feldar Sovereign in his second main phase. Mike shuffles it in, and Trevor casts a Kadama's Reach while Mike is shuffling. Mike then reveals Temple of Deceit, scrying the top card as it comes into play, and keeping it there. Trevor then passes to his first extra turn, discarding his hand, and Sean gets up in disgust, and by disgust, I mean he gets up to go help a customer. Trevor casts Gaunty in the first main phase of his first extra turn, and targets Mike once more, which Sean approves of. Moving to combat, Trevor swings the Strix at Mike, and his copy of Sire at Sean. Both Sean and Mike take the hit, and Trevor gives the Sire lifelink thanks to the Guildmage and his Darksteel Ingot while producing white, and Trevor then recasts Yidris before moving to his next turn. Trevor casts a Volcanic Vision to bring back his Blatant Thievery. This deals 7 to all the creatures his opponents control, but Matt decides to make the spell white with tails and gives all of his creatures protection from white to save his board. Mike and Sean are not so lucky unfortunately though, and lose all their creatures. Trevor then moves to combat and swings Yidris, the Baleful Strix, Gaunty, and the Viscopa Guildmage at Mike, and the Sire Clone at Sean. Trevor then casts Blatant Thievery in his second main phase, and Trevor gets to Cascade first. The spell he hits is a bit lackluster, and Necrologia does not get cast. Trevor then resolves his Blatant Thievery, targeting Sean's Crucible, Matt's Sword, and Mike's Felwar Stone. Matt responds by making the spell white and giving the sword protection from white, and prevents Trevor from stealing it. Trevor then casts Sepulchral Primordial, and cascades into Seasons Past. He casts it, but doesn't target anything to bin it as well. Trevor then brings back Mike's Drogskull Reaver, because it worked so well for him before, Sean's Archfiend of Ifnir, and Matt's Linvala. We then move to Trevor's third turn, and he starts it off by moving to combat. He swings the Archfiend of Ifnir, Linvala, the Drogskull Reaver, and the Primordial at Matt for 19. Trevor also swings Yidris at Mike, and the Guildmage at Sean. Trevor then gains 2 instances of 6 life, and draws 2 cards from the Drogskull Reaver, before moving to his second main phase, where he casts an Alter Ego, where X is 15. Trevor then resolves the Cascade trigger, and hits Toxic Deluge, which he puts on the bottom. He then has the Ego come into play as a copy of the Baleful Strix, and Trevor then casts the Phyrexian Metamorph he drew for 3 mana, taking 2 life from the Phyrexian mana. The Cascade resolves first, and Burgeoning enters the battlefield, before the Metamorph becomes a copy of the Baleful Strix once more, and Trevor draws a card. With nothing else, he moves to his end step, discarding his hand, and passes to Sean. The guys have one more turn, having drawn no mass removal or any way to really deal with Trevor, and have a quick brainstorm session and realize that Trevor's just gotten so out of control, they decide to scoop it up and move to the next game. Game review time. So, this is an important game to see because I think the opening hands really spoke a lot. Trevor's opener had a lot of ramp, but not a lot of action, and the only thing that was really going for him was if he was able to resolve a Rites of Flourishing and hopefully draw into something. This was a bold strategy, but he certainly had enough mana to be able to cast anything that he drew into. I think Sean playing the Sire of Insanity was an interesting move, and I'm not too sure I would have done it in his place. You have to have a lot of faith in your ability to top deck well, and even with drawing 2 cards from the Rites of Flourishing, you're often leaving a lot of things up in the air. Couple that with the fact that Trevor had accelerated so far ahead of the rest of the table, it may have basically sealed the game out for them. Matt's 8.5 Tails is a fantastic deck for being able to pillow fort up and basically weather out the storm. I think out of the 3 opponents, Matt was the one who was able to get a land off the top with Mind's Dilation almost every time and deny Trevor valuable cards. I will say that I think he should have swung at Trevor and not Sean, although I don't think it would have made much of a difference in the end. And then there was Mike. Unfortunately, it seemed that he was left with only the life gain relevant cards, while Trevor was able to steal all the important pillow fort and removal spells. I think one of the critical cards that Trevor was able to steal was the Drogskull Reaver, as it allowed him to draw up to 4 cards as opposed to just the 2 that everyone else was drawing. This allowed him to hit his land drops and still have action in his hand. I will admit though, it was pretty cool to see Trevor use Villainous Wealth for 14 on Mike. Please be sure to tune in every Monday and Thursday at 11 AM Eastern Standard Time for a guaranteed new video. You can also follow me on Twitter at MTGMudsta. You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/MTGMudsta. And lastly, you can check me out when I stream at twitch.tv/MTGMudsta. This video is brought to you in part by support from my Patreons. If you're looking for a way to help out the channel, please be sure to visit my Patreon link below. Thank you all for watching this video, and don't forget, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.